The series of draft grades here on this channel continues on, and now we move on to the lottery class of 2012. This one, after 8 years' time, has proven to be pretty damn strong throughout, with several big-time stars being taken in this draft early on. However, as is the case with most of the other ones we've discussed, there were a few big-time whiffs as well, with teams missing out on potential greatness by taking guys that flopped. As always, we'll be giving a grade to every pick made in the lottery based on how successful or unsuccessful it has worked out for the team with the pick, using context that we now know after 8 years' time. Before we start though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. Starting with the first pick in the draft, the New Orleans Hornets, as they were still known at the time, selected Anthony Davis and got the prize of the draft. Davis took the college world by storm, and as a freshman, he was head and shoulders above the rest of the competition and led his Kentucky team to a national title while winning Player of the Year. He was so good that he even played at the Olympics that summer with Team USA before even stepping foot in the NBA. His athleticism, naturally elite defensive production and instincts, and his offensive prowess made for potentially one of the best bigs in the entire league, and he has fully lived up to that hype. The Hornets/Pelicans as a team may not have ever made a deep run while he was there, but individually he gave them everything that they expected and more. He's one of the top scorers, rebounders, top shot blockers, and is just so incredibly versatile on both ends, and without question, this pick gets a grade of an A+ for getting the best player in the class at number 1. Next up, with the second pick in the draft, the Charlotte Bobcats selected Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who was actually Davis's teammate at Kentucky that year. Those two side by side in college empowered a ridiculously strong Kentucky team, but while Davis went on to progressively make his way to superstardom, MKG's career has taken an almost completely opposite path. The appeal with Kidd-Gilchrist was that he was easily the most well-rounded prospect in the draft at the time, seemingly possessing several skills that should have translated at a high level in the NBA, but his one glaring, overwhelming weakness was that he lacked any kind of shooting ability, and that just never improved over time. His form is completely messed up, and he's very much a liability from the perimeter, and that hasn't changed in 8 years. Plus, while he is a good defender, he isn't good enough to deem giving him big minutes worth it because of his pitfalls. As time has gone on, his role has shrunk more and more. With the amount of top-tier talent available in this draft for the Bobcats to take, one of the least productive players at number 2 overall, I'm sorry, but this pick is a borderline F, but I was generous to give it a D-. Next up, with the third pick in the draft, the Washington Wizards selected Bradley Beal. As a shooting guard, Beal had all of the things you could have asked for from a prospect at the position, with his biggest strength being his shooting ability. He had an effortless shooting stroke and release, was highly efficient, and outside of purely shooting the ball, his ability to generate offense for himself showed promising signs for down the line. Now 8 years later, all of those glimpses we saw of him at Florida have developed to the point where Wizards fans could have only dreamed of, because he's now a 2-time All-Star, one of the toughest wing players to defend one-on-one, and this season, he's averaging over 30 points per game. It seems like every year he's been in the NBA, he's improved rather significantly, and now he's a bona fide star, so because of that, this pick too gets an A+. Up next, with the fourth pick in the draft, the Cleveland Cavaliers selected Dion Waiters. Also at shooting guard, Waiters was the more flashy and explosive scorer at the time of the draft, but perhaps wasn't the most complete and definitely didn't project to be as efficient. He's a natural scorer that always looks to get a basket with the ball in his hands, but at the same time, this has hurt him due to his tendency to take bad shots. Throughout his career, and especially his time in Cleveland, he faced a lot of ups and downs. There would be games where he would look like someone with legit star potential, and other nights not so much. When LeBron returned to Cleveland, it kind of exposed how empty his numbers at the time were, because in a role much more heavily off the ball, and with a team intending to win big, he struggled a bit, so they moved him to Oklahoma City in a 3-team trade that got them J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert. Waiters wasn't an awful pick, but he's proven to not be a very good one either, so for a grade, it gets one in the middle with a C+. Next up, with the 5th pick in the draft, the Sacramento Kings selected Thomas Robinson. I may have been a bit harsh on Kidd-Gilchrist earlier, but at least he's stuck around the league for the entirety of the last 8 years. Robinson was the most hyped up athlete in the class, and the jaw-dropping feats of athletic prowess had scouts incredibly high on him at the time. However, as is the case with a lot of busts historically, he wasn't exactly very skilled, and while some people improve over time like what Giannis has done, others prove to rely too heavily on their athleticism and fizzle out. Robinson struggled a ton as a rookie, and it didn't even take a full season for the Kings to trade him away and give up on him. Over the course of his career, he played 5 seasons with 6 different teams, never doing much of anything at any of his stops. And by 2017, he was completely out of the league. He's one of the more underrated bust players in NBA history, but the grade for this pick is definitely an F. Next up, with the 6th pick in the draft, the Portland Trail Blazers selected Damian Lillard. Lillard went to Weber State for college basketball, so even though he was easily one of the most productive players in college from this draft class, and showed off a professional arsenal of moves and confidence bound to translate, he was somewhat slept on. He wasn't as much of a household name, but that very quickly changed once he started up with the Blazers. The scoring point guard was slowly becoming more and more normalized at the beginning of the decade, so he started at the perfect time, and behind a season where he averaged 19 points and 6.5 assists per game, he won the Rookie of the Year award. We all know very well now that he's one of the best scorers in the entire NBA, a true leader on and off the court, and is absolutely clutch in big moments. He's been the Blazers' franchise pillar for 8 years, and for that, this pick gets yet another A+. Next up, with the 7th pick in the draft, the Golden State Warriors selected Harrison Barnes. Barnes has all of the prototypical attributes of a small forward that NBA teams love, as he stood at 6'8", had very good wingspan, pretty quick and mobile on the wing, and he's very athletic. He's good in catch-and-shoot situations, wasn't the best isolation scorer but could take guys off the dribble relatively well, and every now and then, he would wow you with a ferocious feat of athleticism. For the Warriors, he was a key piece in the early stage of their dynasty, but that all came crashing down in the 2016 finals when he played pretty horribly and was allowed to walk free in free agency that summer. All in all, he was good for Golden State though, and the foul taste that he left in the fans' mouth from that series can't be forgotten though, so this one gets a grade of a B. Next up, with the 8th pick in the draft, the Toronto Raptors selected Terrence Ross. This draft class was very shooting guard heavy, with Ross also playing the position. Coming into Toronto, Ross carved out a pretty good role off the bench early on, and as a 6th man, provided scoring in bunches. He was the typical electric burst of energy and production capable of sparking the team when he subs in and making some plays. Averaging about 10 points per game in his time in Toronto, he was streaky but effective. Just didn't really make much of an impact without the ball in his hands though. For a guy in the middle of the lottery, he was decent overall, and his days on the Raptors came to an end when the team traded him for Serge Ibaka, who ended up playing a big role on the team winning a championship. So for that, this grade gets a B-. Next up, with the 9th pick in the draft, the Detroit Pistons selected Andre Drummond. As I said at the very beginning, this class had a ton of big names taken in the lottery that proved to be stars in the league, and Drummond is yet another example of that. In his 8 years in the league, he's established himself as maybe the best rebounder in the entire league, leading in that category in 4 of the last 5 seasons, putting up about 15 per game regularly. He's also a pretty good shot blocker, he is very mobile offensively in pick and rolls, and finishes strong at the rim. He was a 2-time All-Star while in Detroit, and even though the team never really made any playoff noise, he was still a success individually. This pick also gets an A+, because of his ridiculous production. Up next, with the 10th pick in the draft, the New Orleans Pelicans selected Austin Rivers. As the son of great coach Doc Rivers, Austin was incredibly hyped up since his high school days, and for good reason, because he's a mixtape legend who had a very strong year at Duke as well. In the league though, it wasn't the smoothest transition for him, because he's undersized at the shooting guard position and doesn't exactly have the natural playmaking ability to play point guard, so he was a tweener trying to figure things out for a while. Unfortunately for the Pelicans, Rivers didn't start to come into his own as a quality role player until he got to the Clippers, where he actually got to play for his dad at coach. So for a grade, based on his time on the Pelicans, the pick gets a C. Next up, with the 11th pick in the draft, the Portland Trail Blazers selected Meyers Leonard. Again, with the shift in the game slowly trending towards floor spacing and perimeter shooting, teams valued a big that could shoot highly, so Leonard found himself as a lottery pick because of his willingness and capability to shoot from three. However, while shooting is still one of his biggest strengths in the league now, and always has been, he's only ever been a mediocre bench player whose role on the team has fluctuated a bunch because of his inconsistent play. He doesn't put up big numbers, and he didn't play big minutes on the Blazers, so the pick gets a C-. Up next, with the 12th pick in the draft, the Houston Rockets selected Jeremy Lamb. This will, without question, be the most interesting pick to grade because Lamb didn't actually play a second for the Rockets. Instead, the team used him as trade bait to acquire none other than future superstar and face of the franchise James Harden. Harden was coming off of a 6th Man of the Year campaign and wanted both a bigger role and more money than the Thunder were willing to give him, so instead, they chose to ship him off to Houston for Lamb, who, at best, has turned out to be a decent 6th man. Harden, on the other hand, is breaking boundaries with his scoring and playmaking ability, has an MVP to his name, and breaks new scoring records seemingly every year. It's not a traditional way to get a grade on a pick, but it is an A because of how well they did on the trade market with the player they took. Up next, with the 13th pick in the draft, the Phoenix Suns selected Kendall Marshall. Marshall has all of the qualities that a team would want from their point guard, that is, if their team was playing in the 70s. Yes, he was an unbelievable passer of the basketball, but he lacked any reliable way to score the basketball, struggled on defense, and his impact was minimal. He only lasted one season in Phoenix, just like he would only last one season on each of the next 3 stops he would make on teams around the league, and by 2016, he was out of the league entirely, so this pick also gets an F. And finally, with the 14th pick in the draft, it was made by the Milwaukee Bucks, and with it, they took John Henson. Henson's yet another example of a player who had every physical attribute and athletic prowess on his side, which made scouts very high on him. But as time has gone on, he never really developed much past what he started as. He had a very long wingspan, was incredibly mobile and athletic, and had a ton of potential to dominate defensively, but he just didn't really do that. A lot of his best years came when the Bucks were still near the bottom of the standings and trying to figure things out, and when they started to make their way into the playoff hunt, his role got smaller and smaller. He was never anything more than a bench player, and as a result, this pick gets a grade of a C. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what grades you would have given the picks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.